Good afternoon. Welcome to Real People, Real Stories Raw. My name is Jay Rothman, and I'm excited to have a special guest in the studio with me this morning, this afternoon, evening, depending on what side of the world or country you're coming in from. Today, I have a guest. Her name is Lesa Williams, and I'd like to welcome you to the studio. Lesa, good morning.
Hello. It's good to be here, Jay. Thank you so much for having me.
You're actually coming in from the East Coast, I believe. What state are you? Is home for you today?
North Carolina.
Okay, so back east, it's actually 1:30 in the afternoon, and while we wait for some people to join us live in the studio, I'd like to welcome David Amison coming in from Florida, and we got John Thaddeus Fiore coming in from Jersey Shore of New Jersey. Good afternoon to the two of you gentlemen. David comes out of the gate and says, "This I do need to hear. Thank you, Jay Rothman." We got Mary Kelly joining us as well. So while we are waiting for those to join us, I'm going to actually post it as a watch party right now. And give me 1 second here to get this set up. How are you doing today, by the way, Lesa?
Doing really good. Got some good rest yesterday. I needed.
So, Lesa, I posted a little bit of your bio to introduce you to those that are watching live or on replay. My understanding is your story is one of you and your husband joined what you thought was a religious organization, a Christian church of sorts, and you didn't realize at the time that it really was a cult of some sorts, and you birthed 12 children, and you spent about 15 years in the cult with your family, and then at some point, I believe it was your oldest son at age 19 had a tragic car accident, and he passed, and it was shortly thereafter that you had your awakening and decided to leave the cult. And so that's Lesa's bio. And what I'd like to do, Lesa, is first of all, thank you for joining me live in the studio today. My understanding is this may be, in fact, your first opportunity to do a live show where you're sharing your story.
Yes.
Is that correct? Have you shared your story in any other, let's say, platform or modality, as in like a group of any sort, or a book of any kind, or?
No, just with individuals.
Okay. So this is a pretty big step for you today.
It is.
Okay.
I feel like I've been calling too, but it takes time to get to that place. So it was time.
And what is it for you? What's behind all of this? Why? I know that my understanding is you had watched a prior show that I did with Frank Lyford, who actually had been part of a different cult out in San Diego was the last place they were all before they had a mass suicide in the 90s. And I think it was during that show that you watched that you were inspired to come on and share your own story, because it was very different than Frank's. Is that right?
Yes. I recall what we were in was a movement. I'm sure many on here have heard of Bill Gothard with IBLP and ATI. There were thousands and thousands of families a part of that all over the United States and even worldwide to this day. He's not in leadership anymore because of some things that he was accused of and found guilty over. But he left a lot of damage in that wake within our families. So.
How's about we start kind of at the beginning? What led up to, if you could share a little bit about your background, your backstory leading up to why you joined that particular movement, and then perhaps share a little bit about what it was like being a member of the movement and how it all unfolded for you.
I would love to. So my story begins, like many others, in childhood. I was born with a couple of conditions that caused me to suffer greatly physically and emotionally. and left me feeling very ostracized and different as a child and growing up through the years and being bullied in junior high and high school. And eventually ended up getting pregnant at 16 by a man that I did marry, and he was very abusive, and escaped with my life and my children's life. And I feel like that we go into these cults because we are looking for something that within our own childhood and with our own heart, within our own selves, we're just not enough. And so we're looking for our tribe. We're looking to be accepted because we never really felt accepted. And so also just trying to be something for somebody else to prove to some others who we are. And so that's really how I grew up. Thankfully, I got away from my first marriage, which I had 2 children by him, and met my present husband now, and been married about 34 years. And a couple of years into our marriage, actually right when we did marry, I had gotten away from Christianity, and we rededicated our lives together and got rebaptized together and began on that Christian walk. And so as the years went by, I still, in my heart, was empty. I had suffered with depression for most of my life. And so as we entered the Christian realm in the Christian church, I heard about this group. We had wanted to start homeschooling. I had already had 4 children, 2 by my previous marriage and 2 by him. And those 4 were C-sections. And so as we got into this IBLP ATI group, the teaching was very different from what was even within our Christian church. It wasn't a church. It was a movement. And so as we began to learn about it and go to the seminars and the homeschool program that we went to every year, the teachings were very, very conservative, that you would have all the children God would give you, that your husband is your umbrella of protection, and that you submit to him and be obedient to him. It was easy with my husband. I have a really sweet and kind husband. So we both, agreed to this way of life. And as the years passed, we got more and more conservative, moved in an Amish community for many years. We didn't become Amish, but we continue to live that conservative lifestyle and follow those teachings. And very conservative dress, only wearing dresses, sometimes a head covering, no TV, again, having all the children that God would give you, and that you would be fruitful and multiply. And I was doing that. So having said that, it never fulfilled me. In my heart, I still lived in deep depression. I could never do enough. I could never measure up. And I kept trying and trying and trying. And I wondered what was wrong with me all those years. Even though I was feeding my family well, 3 meals a day, cooking, homeschooling, gardening, homesteading, in my heart, I still felt empty. And I'd pray every day, the joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength. And I'd read scripture and I'd prostrate and pray for hours and just still feel like I didn't measure up. And
when you say you feel like you didn't measure up, was it a lack of, let's say, connection with the divine or God? Or were you feeling that you didn't measure up to the other women that were in the movement? Or did you not measure up to just the, let's say the philosophy of what the expectations were of the women in the movement? Was it one, all, or some?
I would say it was the women, maybe God too, but I felt like I had a really close connection with God or with Jesus at the time. But when I look back, it was a real self-martyrdom and a real sacrifice that you just couldn't give enough of yourself. They wouldn't teach that. but it is true. And I didn't realize that until I got out either. And so, yes, the competition, the competitiveness with other women and what their children looked like and how well they behaved, and going home and my children, didn't seem to behave as well as theirs did, but that was in my home. When I took them out, they did, but it was awful, Jay, to be honest with you, because children are children. But I would see them out and about, and they would, look so different and so much better than me. And
well, was that something that in that moment, was that just through your eyes that you saw it and through your mind that you thought it? Or were words and behaviors directed at you that allowed you to feel that way? Do you understand the difference between the two?
I do, and
Okay.
I think it was both. Because I had very high expectations of myself, and yet I would hear other people, and they would affirm us and encourage us and put us on that pedestal like I put other women, which is a really dangerous place to be in the first place. But then I would look, and because the way others believed within that community that I had been divorced and remarried, which was taboo there, that it was both.
Okay.
So it was about, it was I went on to have 4, so I had those 4 C-sections, had the conviction that we'd have all the children God would give us, started having home births. And then 17 years ago, we had a tragic accident, like what you'd mentioned, that our oldest son, Michael, was killed in a car accident. And there is nothing like a trauma to turn your world completely upside down. And things were already difficult, but when that happened, it turned my adult children's lives upside down too, because he was really close to them. And he was a wonderful big brother. And they could not understand why God would do such a thing. And so all that hard work began to just slough off, and I began to question, why am I doing all this? And I felt Michael very close to me. And I had been very distant from my children because of the way I did believe and not listening to them. And when this tragedy struck, all of that fell away. And I remember we homesteaded, and I was in my garden. It was a huge garden. And I was sitting there pulling the weeds like I needed to do in my life and asked, am I in rebellion to you? And was directing it towards God. And I felt my spirit speak to me and said, no, you're rebelling against of rejection. Before, it was always fear of failure. It was fear of rejection from heaven. Am I going to go to hell because I don't believe this way anymore, because I'm going to wear a pair of jeans? Or I'm going to have friends outside of this community? It was a huge shift. And we still walk that way for a little bit, not as strict. It's a slow process. It was for us. And when Michael died, we decided not to homeschool all of our children anymore. It was too much work for me. I almost had a nervous breakdown after Michael died. And starting a new life over in a different way. And my husband got transferred here to North Carolina. I was also very pregnant with my 11th child. I was 6 months pregnant, and it was very traumatic. So anyway, that's when we began to, I got pregnant again with the 12th, and that's when things began to change for me, as I don't want any more children. I was 42 and I was still thinking that, and talked to my husband about it. He still wanted more. There were many years that I felt like life was so hard. We had a severely handicapped son and had 7 after him, and continued to work with him in homeschool and do all the things that I did. When I look back, I just think, Lord, oh, it was a hard life that I put on myself and my family. But anyway, we agreed with baby number 12 that that would be it, and stopped at that. And it was still a process of moving forward out of this. He still was very much into that. But for me, I was in the questioning zone of where did I belong and what do I do now? So 5 years ago, my husband got transferred here to North Carolina. And I put my children in public school, the rest of them. And I cried for 6 months. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what to do. What was I good for? All I'd ever done was have children and been obedient to my husband, which I love very much. I did it gladly, except for the depression, but that a lot had to do with my background and my past and my childhood. And so anyway, came here and cried for 6 months. What am I good for? I'm only a mom. And I was given a dream one night. And I was on the ocean, and I was in a little bitty boat. And there I was in the middle of this ocean. And a huge whale came up and bumped the boat, tipped it. And as it tipped, its fin scaled my cheek. I had been touched by my spirit guide. I woke up the next morning. That depression totally lifted, has never returned, and going on 6 years. And I asked the name. I asked if my spirit guide would give me a name. She told me her name was Shiva, which I'd never heard before, which can actually go male or female after I looked it up. And since then, Jay, I've been on a walk of self-love, self-acceptance, self-forgiveness, and working on that in my own spiritual way with no depression, no condemnation, like I felt for all those years in the Christian cult and community, always condemned, never free. And I've never felt so much freedom in all my life. And so I've been able to go back to my children and tell them that I'm sorry for the mistakes that we made through those years. Our intentions were love. Our intentions were good. It taught me many things. It taught me how to bond with my children. I wore them, co-slept with them, all those things that are really popular right now. And I think that those things were really important, that if we can learn from those past things that we walk through and that we can empower ourselves, it emanates to the world around us. As women are rising, divine feminine is rising. And now everything that I went through has led me to the woman that I am now, as far as I'm a birth worker. So I'm a birth doula, I'm a home birth midwife assistant, and a spiritual birth coach with a course that I created online. And I say all that because women still need to understand that they can be empowered, that they aren't second citizens by any means. And the only oppression that they have is what they withhold within themselves from their own fears.
Well, I'm going to invite you just to take a moment here as you pause, just to take a nice deep breath in, Lesa, and let it out when you are ready. I just want to honor you and thank you so much for having the courage to step forward today and share your truth, your story, your life, your experience of having gone through what you went through. And it takes a lot of courage. And that's why I wore this shirt today, in honor of you and to show respect to you. Because I know how difficult it is to step out of an environment, out of a home, out of a community where, although you felt empty, you didn't describe it this way, but I'll paraphrase how your experience felt for me for many years of my life. I had this black hole within my soul, and I didn't know how to fill it up. I didn't know how to get rid of it. I just kept trying every possible creative way to feel better, all from external, um, let's say, catalysts, external activities, people, places, and things. And I was searching in all the wrong places for that. Now, your experience was quite different than mine, but I believe where you're at in your healing process and journey today of your own mind, body, and soul is in a very similar space that I am right now. It appears as though, from what I understand, you seem to have some inner peace today, and acceptance, as you said, acceptance as far as what you had to go through, and accepting the fact that the choices that you made, although they were very, very painful and damaging to you and your family, you had to go through that to get to here where you are today. And I believe I also heard you mention self-love for yourself. And so I just wanted to just share that part with you. And I'm smiling because although I'm not able to physically touch you, I feel like I'm touching you right now. And listening to you share your story, it's just so beautiful. It's so inspirational to me to know that no matter what we are facing, whether it be having made a choice to enter into a cult, whether it be a diagnosis that we receive, whether a medical diagnosis, whether it be relationships that are destroyed, whatever those moments are where we are at our bottom, where we are in pain and suffering, there is hope. And the hope comes into play when we understand that we can heal our perspective every day. We just have to be willing to have the courage to change.
It's a choice every day, Jay, to get up every morning and be fulfilled and not have that emptiness because we have filled ourselves. And does it mean I'm perfect? No. But it does mean that I don't live in that dark space and that darkness of the moon, that I call it, for most of my life, and has never returned. And it also helps, as we heal, it also helps heal our families as well. You know, to be able to go to each of them and apologize for the mistakes that we made and give them space, whatever that means, and to help them grow by loving them no matter what they choose, no matter what they choose.
When you wanted to leave, I'm stepping back just a moment here. You said it took a while for your husband to agree to exit out. At that time, was there any talk about him staying and you going?
Well, it's easier to leave in it wasn't like a community. We weren't part of the Amish and the Mennonite, even though we lived in that community. It was still a movement. So we just didn't do it anymore and didn't really connect with the people. Was it hard? There were several people in the community that were living that same way, that we were talked about, that my children were looked down on, that we were all in rebellion. I'm sure that some of, people on here understand that it wasn't like Frank. You could really leave at any time without, it would be more judgment from outside, I guess. So I think it's a bit different, that we just, in my heart, I just didn't believe what I had been studying and reading for 20 years.
When did you have the moment of clarity that, in fact, you actually had joined a cult of sorts? That
took, let me see, when we moved to Iowa, that was probably only about 7 years ago. And I had began to read information on what cults are. And it was usually by one man, and how he gathered his own information and distributed it to many. And I was just like, oh, and you isolate yourself from other family members too that don't believe that way. And that's exactly what I did. I isolated myself from my family, separated my children and myself from my family. And just going, wow, this was what we were in. This is it. And then I went to some of my family members and talked to them about it. And they tried to tell me, but I completely cut them off. Jay, they would try to tell me, why are you believing this way? What's wrong with you? And that just made me isolate myself even more, you know? And so when I was able to go to them and say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I left you out of my life. And what I was involved in was a cult. But again, it had to do with emptiness and not trusting myself through those years that we are looking for acceptance of a group of people. And they agreed, of course, because they knew it before I did. And my husband would agree with that. We've talked about it extensively, that he would agree that we were a part of a cult. And
how long ago did you leave the cult, by the way?
Probably about 8-9 years ago.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And my children, I feel like my adult children, I feel like are really the ones that were talking to me of why did we believe this way? And they would tell me, Mom, it's out of fear. Sorry. You're not drinking or dancing or watching TV or any of that out of love of God. It's out of fear. Well, I couldn't see that. And when they told me that, it was like, and I sat with that. I was like, it's true. My dad was a bad alcoholic. And so a lot of the things that drove me to the way I believed were from my past trauma. And it was fear-based and fear-driven.
How does it feel right now to hear yourself share these words with us today?
All I can say is freedom from Braveheart.
Beautiful.
Seriously, yes. It also frees my other children. I know I have one in the other bedroom that I told him I was going to do this. And as they see me set free, Jay, it thrills them. They love it. And even though there's been some conflict with my husband and I as far as how he still believes and how I believe, he knows that there's no depression in me anymore. He lived that. My children lived with that. And he can say, I'm happy for you. So I'm hoping that
Beautiful.
at some point that he find that freedom too.
How did you manage your depression? Did you use what was your let's say your different means of trying? How did you manage it? Just that simple.
Just one day at a time. When I look back, I never had time to. I think, well, at that time it was even then prayer. You know, reading the Bible, prayer. I think that's what held it. Even though it didn't free it, it held it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And so that was my stronghold, and my husband was the pillar. But it was never, I distinctly remember a couple of times where it lifted, that I could literally want to pull over the side of the road and go, oh, it's gone. But only a couple of times in 40 years of my life. A lot of the physical suffering that I go through, with the conditions that I have, physical pain causes depression. And so I lived with a lot of physical pain that caused depression as well. And I didn't really have time to go to a doctor I did one time. I went one time. And I was put on medication, and it made me feel worse, like a zombie. I had a lot of little children. I couldn't do that. And so my modality, which I didn't share this, is that I've always been health-minded, nutritional-minded, ever since I was a little girl. Like even for lunch, I would go get an avocado for a snack. and, in my pregnancies, even though I didn't gain a lot of weight and had a problem with hunger and stuff, what I did put into my body and what I wanted to feed my children was optimal health and optimal nutrition. Because I believe then, as I believe now, even though I went through a lot, I was diagnosed with MS 2 years after Michael died, and I believe that was trauma triggered, that I was able to heal that through nutrition. Because I do feel and believe that we are what we eat. And so that is a very spiritual thing. Our spiritual walk has nothing to do with religion. It has everything to do with physically, mentally, emotionally, and physically where we are. And so I would have to say that probably that too helped, Jay. I believe that nutrition can do that too. So maybe that was part of my medicinal.
How has your relationship with Glenn, who's your husband, changed since you were touched by the whale in your dream, and since the darkness of the soul, darkness of the night, depression was lifted from you within hours of that dream? How has your relationship changed?
Wow. I'll cry on this one.
It's okay. Let it out. This is a crying zone, Lesa.
Okay. I have a much deeper love for him now. Because I see him walking through now of him not being enough and feeling that he's enough. That's how I felt all those years that he carried me through, and that he loved me, and that he was my pillar. He was my strength. And that now, as he invested in me, that I would give him a good return on his love for me. And that I can understand and feel for him.
Why do you think he stayed all those years? You guys are together, I think you said 34 years?
Yeah.
Why do you think he stayed?
We have such a deep love for each other. We have been through so much together, Jay. Having the children that we did, he loved them so much. He loved me, took such good care of me when I was pregnant, and he's such a caring human being. He wouldn't even think about that. That would not even be. It may come to a point, as far as him even finding the codependency and understanding that can you live without somebody? Well, I don't want to. He doesn't want to live without me. I don't want to live without him. So I think that is an incredibly beautiful thing. When you have a marriage that has gone through, we have a severely handicapped son. Over 90% of couples that have a child that has problems like that end up in divorce. We stay together. We work through a lot of problems, like I shared. And then the death of a son. Another over 90% of couples divorce because of that. And so it even went beyond our religious beliefs of we won't ever let that word come out of our mouth. It was more of a surrendering of we love each other. He loves me. I love him. I couldn't do that to him, and he couldn't do that to me. We are the pillars for our children as well. That's important.
Did all your children, have all of them stayed in the Christian faith, or any of them exited out of a religious affiliation and gone more on the spiritual side, or where are they all at in their journey?
They're really on their own journey. None of them are within the Christian religion. Some of them maybe pagan, or so. Here's the difference. So I had a girl and 5 boys and a girl and 5 more boys. And so I had 10 boys. And most of them are minimalist. They, some of them live homelessly purposely because they don't want to live like we live, as far as trading hours for dollars. They all work very hard. They all have good jobs or a trade, but they have chosen to really go their own path, whatever that means. And I remember fretting about it many years ago and just thinking, oh my gosh, what are they going to do now that, that's not there anymore, which they decided they didn't want anyway. And I remember my oldest son now, not the one that died, said, Mom, it's really hard to grow up. That was a spiritual message to me, to love my children no matter what their choices are. And I mean that. That is not just words out of my mouth. That is coming from here. And that they know that no matter what life they choose or who they choose to worship or not worship or whatever, that I love them. We love them. And so it's hard to grow up. It's my job to be here for them. Isn't it hard to grow up? It's hard to grow up.
Yeah, and there's that part of us that, I believe our inner child is alive and well and kicking and having meltdowns and temper tantrums and
yes.
And erratic at times, and I'm okay with that. It doesn't mean that by any means am I advocating to be a Peter Pan, but I do advocate for us to feel safe to invite ourselves to have play dates and have fun and enjoy life and take adventures. And I'm not talking about adventures that cost thousands of dollars. I'm talking about adventures that, like some of your children have found, cost little to no money. And so
that's free than what we taught them. It's a different life. So,
you know what I think? I think what's coming to me right now in this moment, I think what's more important than growing up is us opening ourself, our mind, our body, and our soul to growth, to growing. I think that's way more important than growing up. Because we could have a young spirit, we could have a young soul about ourselves and still be open to receive and learn and grow. And still just know the right things to do for ourselves and how to take care of ourselves and how to love ourselves.
Yes.
So if I had to pick and choose one or the other, I'd say, I wake up every day with a sense of excitement that I'm going to get to have some growth opportunities today. And not because everything is smooth sailing, but because I know that there's a good chance that I'm going to have to face some challenges, some difficulties, because I'm not living in a hut. I'm not living isolated. I'm living in society. And we are challenged with people that are in pain.
Every day.
Every day.
Every day.
And so their pain is an opportunity, not for me to take it on as an empath, but to look at it and understand, why is it affecting me? And what have I not worked on for myself? Some old wounds or traumas that have triggered me or brought me into their energy field that I don't want to be in today. And so it's a growth opportunity.
It gets easier and easier every day, the more we do it, though, that we can see it, integrate it, move through it, and let it go. And I think it's a daily practice. And it helps us to love others at a greater realm. Because if we're stuck in ourselves, as far as an empath, and we take on everybody else's energy, then we aren't able to give of our own energy and of our own self. And the only way we can do that is really be able to be alone with ourselves and love ourselves every day. Which is freedom.
Yes, there's the freedom.
Yes.
So you described earlier in this show that for many years you felt less than. I'm going to paraphrase you and allow me to share what I heard was you were not good enough. You never felt like you belonged, even though you were in a cult. You always felt like an outsider. You felt like you were being judged. And all those emotions that go along with those feelings that you carried for decades. How is your life different today as far as where you are at with yourself? Do you just like yourself, or have you fallen in love with yourself yet?
Oh no, I love myself very much. You know, and the strength that I have and all the gifts that I have to offer people out of what I want to do and how much I want to give, not to impress anybody else, or, you know, even being on here as far as what we talked a little bit earlier, as far as not caring what anybody thinks about me. This is who I am. And from that, the light and the love that emanates from who I am personally, internally, with everything that I've been through, even with my physical conditions, no shame.
Beautiful. I want to go back. We've had a pretty active community chiming in, sharing their comments and thoughts, and I want to just acknowledge those that have joined us live today, and thank you for being here to support Lesa as you held her hand as she walked through this first time experience of sharing her story on a live stream. I'd like to thank you for those of you that joined us on live. If you catch us on a replay, you're not too early and you're not too late. You're just on time. There is no right time. It's just when we show up. I also want to acknowledge something that Debbie said, and I need to find it here, but I want to just ask you what your perspective on this is. I want to go back to your dream that you had when your life changed. You had a dream that a whale touched up against you, and the next morning your depression was lifted. Understanding this was not a short-term depression, this was a chronic depression that you had suffered with for years. And what her comment says is
over 40 years.
How many?
What was that, Jay? Are we cutting out here? What?
It says, her comment says, wow, amazing. I just had a dream about whales last night.
About whales last night?
Yeah, she just had a dream about whales last night. Now, she didn't go deeper into that and share what was her takeaway from the dream, what she recalls. But I am interested to hear from you, Lesa. What do you think really happened in that dream, as you described it, that changed the trajectory of your life from that day forward? What really happened?
Can you, because you're cutting out quite a bit.
I can hear you. I asked, did you hear me ask, what do you think was behind the whale? Why did the whale change your life in a dream? Because Deb just had a dream about
when
whales last night.
When I looked up the meaning of that, because I'd never thought of whales before, and I even watched a little YouTube about killer whales and the powerfulness and the oneness and how they interact with their young, and it was just human. It was such even a human experience. And I felt also my sister, she gave me an interpretation of that dream, which absolutely knew, but for her to confirm that was like, that was totally a moment that totally switched my life. And I still physically suffer. My physical body, with the conditions that I have, hasn't necessarily got any better. That awakening, Jay, that awakening, that freedom, that divine, that we are divine. We are enough. We are all we need. And how many years I spent trying to be enough for everybody else was such a catch, and so it's just about the freedom and that epiphany of, oh my God, really? Whoa. I am beautiful. I'm strong. I'm totally enough for whatever I'm given. How good is that? Do I ever get down? Yes, we all do. Just like you were saying earlier, every day we face things that can happen. Do we stay there? If something were to happen to me years ago, I would be down for days and days and days. Or if my husband did something I didn't like, I'd be angry at him for days. It's terrible. Who wants to live like that? And so as that freedom started, it just frees everybody else up. If you're in that, other people get in that too. We're not entities unto ourselves. We're not islands. It is a choice. As I choose to stay free, that frees them up too. Because they're walking on eggshells because of me. I don't want that to happen anymore. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question?
You did. Of course, I've got other things, other ideas and thoughts that are just swirling and coming from within. One statement that I shared with you, well, two that come to mind. One is the teacher shows up when the student is ready. And in some way, you were ready, and just through a dream, that when you were physically touched by the well, that touch was all you needed to light up. That touch was your awakening. And so therein lies, again, what comes to mind for me is hope, that we never know when or how we are going to be blessed with our own awakening, coming out of the darkness of the night. And being able to come home to our soul, to ourself. And it's such a beautiful experience that you shared with me today.
It is beautiful. But we have to go through that dark night, through our own childhood trauma. Michael's death, the death of a child. There has been times that I said, I'm sorry it took that. I wish it would not have taken that. And then I have a reminder in my heart and in my soul that it's okay, it took that. Better late than never.
Something that just popped for me, that just came from within, and I'm just going to share it with you because I feel I need to, is that through your son's death, he gave you the gift of life, your second life.
He did.
Are you okay to hear that, to receive that?
Absolutely. I truly, truly believe that. He has visited me many times in dreams, in visions, in so many ways that I knew that it was him.
Beautiful.
And our loved ones are always here. They're just in a different realm, in a different dimension. That's one.
Yeah, he's here with you. Deb says he's not dead, hon. He stepped out to wake you up. He's still with you, and he is so proud of you.
I actually heard that not too long ago when I went to my first psychic reading not too long ago, a few months back, which was amazing. And she told me the same thing, that he's always with us. Our severely handicapped son is in Iowa, and we have not been able to bring him here. He was my first home birth after my 4 traumatic C-sections. And Michael is with Josiah a lot. He's with my oldest daughter a lot, which they were very, very close. They were blood sister and brother. And he's here as well. And so absolutely I can receive that and know that.
Okay. One other comment, I'm gonna put this one up on a screen as we are getting close to the hour, believe it or not. Deb says, if you try to go back to your dream of the whale, meditate on it and meet your whale guides again. They will help you navigate and help you on your spiritual journey. Have you done that? Have you tried to go back and meditate on that experience and see if you could reconnect?
I actually haven't, Jay. I feel like that guide is with me all the time, and it's where I have been, the direction of why I've been going the way I have.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah, so sometimes we don't need to go back. We just have to stay. It's a choice. We don't have to, but a healthy way to live is to be present for the moment.
Yeah.
And know that you never will be alone again in your life. Now that you have experienced your awakening, you understand that you are not alone.
No, and everything that I need, I call upon it. It's present. I mean, even this meeting, even today, for me to, after hearing Frank going, wow, there's a lot of people that have been bondage to that. I was one. And to even be on here, public speaking, you know, there's nothing that we're not capable of. And when I sometimes still get in that fear mode, I take a deep breath, and right around the corner, the answer is there. Right around the corner, through you, through my boot camp group that I'm a part of, Spiritual Business Boot Camp alumni, the people that I met through that, the beautiful spiritual leaders that I've met through that have touched me in so many ways that all I have to do is speak it and rest in it. Those are what matters to me.
That's amazing.
I'm accountable to myself.
Yes. That's where I think the growing up begins. Mm-hmm. Right there. You just nailed it. Because you see, when I was in a dysfunctional relationships, I should say, it was way easier for me to look at other people's behavior and point the finger and go to blame.
Yes.
And when I hit my rock bottom 40 plus months ago, just 3.5 years ago or so, it was the first time in my life that I forced myself to look in the mirror and stop looking outward and start looking inward and holding myself accountable and acknowledging my part in everything, every choice I made, every destructive relationship that I had, every hurtful relationship. And I hold myself 100% accountable for my part. And it's up to the other individual or individuals to hold themselves 100% accountable for their part. But that's between them and their universe, and it's between me and my God. And it's a simple way to live today, but I tell you what, I love it because it keeps me in check. And when I screw up and I have to apologize to somebody, if I've wronged them and if I've hurt them, I'm okay with it today. I truly am, because I know that I'm doing the best I can, and when I'm not, it's just an opportunity to learn and grow something more about myself that I didn't know.
That's right.
But so there's where the growing up comes in, is through holding ourselves accountable. We are at a time, what I would like to do is ask you, Lesa, if you'd be willing to put a pretty bow on the show and maybe just kind of give us a few words of wisdom that you could share that maybe someone that watches this show live or on replay needs to hear today, something that you could share with them that comes from your heart.
So many of us live in fear. Fear is only false evidence appearing real. Fear is an illusion. It's not of who you are. When you find who you are, There is no fear. You are complete. You are whole. You are fully enough. You are put on this planet, on this earth, which when you choose to come to this earth, it's a hard life. There are many lives that are much easier than on this earth. But you chose to come here to experience what you did for your own personal growth. So do away with the fear, put it down, false evidence appearing real. That's the illusion. You are not.
Thank you for that. I shared that acronym for fear yesterday. I was doing a hike and heal experience on the mountain with 4 guests yesterday, and we were talking about fear and healing relationships, and that was one. There's another one that I love to share that you may have heard of. It's forgetting everything's all right, which means most of the time when we're in fear, it's fear of something that's not going to happen today, but something in the future that may or may not unfold. Mm-hmm. And if we just bring ourselves back to this moment, because all we're guaranteed is this moment. And if we are standing vertical and we are breathing, everything is all right.
It is all right. We are alive.
Yeah. And so here's my closing thoughts. One is, I want to thank you so much for coming forward and having the courage to share your story. You are just an amazing, beautiful, beautiful soul who continues to bring the gifts to yourself first and foremost, and then to your husband, Glenn, and then to your children, all of your children, those that are with us and those that are physically not with us today. And I also want to say this, is that what I learned in my own healing journey is that I can't live in fear and faith at the same time. Fear is for people. Faith is for the universe. And as long as I'm living in fear, then I'm forgetting that regardless of the outcome, that the universe or the divine or Jesus or God has me right where I'm supposed to be.
Yes.
And I just have to be willing to trust that. And so, what's that?
Staying conscious.
So when I'm aware that I'm in a moment of fear thought, I have a little bell now that goes off in my mind. And it's like, I can't live in fear and live in faith. And it's like a mantra. I just say it until I come back to believing it in that moment and distract myself through that mantra so that I can now release the fear. And that's just a tool that works for me today. And with that, you're welcome. With that, I want to thank you again for joining me today. If you could stay in the studio for just a moment so we could just do a quick wrap up together. I would like to ask if after the show in the next 24 hours or so, if you could maybe go back through Facebook and find the show, and it should be on your page, and maybe reply to some of the people in the community that have stepped forward and been part of the show with us, engaging. And with that, I'd like to thank you and those that joined us today on Real People, Real Stories Raw. We do have a show. I've got a show coming up Friday night. Friday night show is going to be my second show I'm doing. It's called Real People, Real Health. I've got a woman coming in from Wales. That's in Great Britain. And she has got an amazing story that she's going to share of how her life was upside down with a medical diagnosis and prognosis and enough drugs to send her to the moon and back. And today she is drug-free. And she suffered from something called significant mental health disease and illness. And she is well today. And she's going to come on and share her story of healing her mind, body, and soul. That'll be Friday. Actually, it's going to be sometime during the day Friday because she is 7 hours ahead. So I've always got to take that into account. So that'll be the next show. But for today, it's a wrap. Have a beautiful day, no matter where you are, physically and spiritually. Know this: you never are alone. All you have to do is just reach out and know that someone here, it will be here for you. And with that, enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.